Every clock in Mercy General Hospital clicks with that familiar mechanical rhythm, except one. The second hand in room 237 glides in perfect silent circles, smooth as oil on glass. For months, I dismissed it as a broken clock. But broken clocks don't make heavily sedated patients wake up at exactly 3:13 a.m. every single night, staring at that smooth-moving hand with terror in their eyes. And broken clocks don't make time stretch and compress until you lose track of everything except the growing certainty that something is very, very wrong. My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old, and I've been working the night shift in the ICU for over a decade. I used to be proud of how sharp I was, how I could time my rounds to the minute, how my patients never missed a dose or a turn, but room 3 changed that. Room 3 made me start moving by instinct. I don't check the time when I'm in there anymore. The air feels different, heavy, still, like I'm underwater, and somehow, no matter how long I stay in that room, the clock on the wall always says the same thing when I leave, 3:17 a.m. It started with little things, nothing worth logging or mentioning to anyone, just patients waking up at the exact same time, even when heavily sedated. I'd be adjusting a monitor or checking a drip, and their eyes would snap open, wide, terrified. Every single one of them looked straight at the clock. Then they'd look at me, not around the room, not at their vitals, just me, like I was supposed to explain something. One man whispered, "It's almost my turn," and died 15 minutes later. No alarms, no signs of distress. He just stopped. His heart monitor went flat like it was planned, expected, right on schedule. I told myself it was coincidence, a nurse's mind playing tricks. I stayed professional, detached, but it kept happening. And not just once in a while. Every time we used that bed, I started checking the room before the shift started, making sure everything was normal. But by the time 3:17 rolled around, the tension would crawl in again, a low pressure behind my eyes, like a migraine that never quite hits. I tried reporting the clock for replacement. Maintenance came, looked at it, said it was fine, said the smooth ticking was part of a new model, said I was probably just tired. I stopped asking after that. It wasn't worth the raised eyebrows, but I started avoiding room 3 unless I absolutely had to go in. And even then, I made sure not to be there long. The thing is, when I'm in there too long, I start feeling watched, not by the patient, by something else, something behind the walls, like the room itself is aware, and not kindly. Then came the night. I couldn't avoid it. We were overbooked. All other beds were full. They wheeled in a woman in her late 60s, post-stroke, still unresponsive. She was stable, monitored, quiet. Her family had already said their goodbyes earlier that evening. I was the one assigned to sit with her during the peak hours. I brought my chart and a folding chair and settled in. The clock read 2:41 a.m. I remember because I stared at it for a long time, watching the hand slide past the numbers like a dancer. I must have dozed off just a moment, but when I opened my eyes, the room was darker, colder, and the clock read 3:17, exactly, again, and I wasn't alone. There was a sound in the corner, a breath, but not from the patient. Hers was shallow, erratic. This one was calm, even, deep, like someone meditating. I turned my head slowly. There was nothing there, just the chair I had folded up earlier. Now it was open again, facing the bed, facing me. I stood up, chest tight, no alarms. Vitals were unchanged, but the air felt electric, like just before a lightning strike. I took one step toward the door, and the clock started moving backwards. Not fast, just slowly enough that it made me doubt myself. 3:16, then 3:15. I looked back at the bed. The woman's eyes were open, wide, staring at the ceiling. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I leaned in. She mouthed the word run. So I did. I didn't even close the door behind me. I stood at the nurse's station, heart pounding, watching the monitors. Hers stayed steady for another 10 minutes. Then they flatlined. No struggle, no pain, just silence. After that, I couldn't sleep properly. Not on work nights, not at home. I started waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night, no matter when I went to bed. Once I smashed my kitchen clock just to make it stop ticking, only to wake and see the microwave clock flashing, 3:17, even though there had been no power outage. I took leave for a week, told them it was migraines. During that week, I stayed in hotels, different ones each night, still woke at 3:17, still felt that invisible pressure, that eyes on my back sensation. I don't know what it wants from me. Maybe nothing, maybe just my attention. Maybe that's worse. I tried asking around about room 3, casually, carefully. No one would say much, but I noticed that everyone else avoided it too. Subtly, they'd shuffle the assignments, trade duties. No one outright refused, but no one ever lingered there. One of the older nurses, retired now, once muttered, "Room 3 doesn't let go once it sees you." I pretended not to hear. She pretended not to say it. Now I just work around it. I don't go in unless I have to. I keep my eyes down, never look at the clock directly. I've learned to feel when it's near 3:17. My skin prickles and my ears ring softly, like I'm underwater again. Sometimes I pass the room and see someone sitting in the chair by the bed, even when the room's marked empty. Just for a second, just out of the corner of my eye. When I look back, it's gone. But the clock is always visible, always moving, smooth, silent. People think hospitals are loud, that they're all alarms and cries and footsteps. But the worst things here aren't loud. They're the silences, the way the air stills right before something happens, the way time stops, not with a bang but a whisper. I still work here, still walk these halls. But room 3 is no longer just a room to me. It's a presence, a waiting thing. It doesn't chase, it doesn't demand, it just waits, like the clock, watching, gliding. And I think it's waiting for me to stop avoiding it, to sit down again, to see what it wants to show me. Some hours aren't measured in time, but in what they take from you. The light under room 5's door is never off, even though the overhead lights were disconnected years ago, even though the room was sealed shut after a fire gutted half the east wing, even though no one, not even the bravest night nurse, uses that hallway anymore if they can help it. But the light is always there, a soft yellow-white glow that spills into the hallway like a silent breath. You can see it in the dark, pressing just under the door like a waiting animal. The tiles around it are always warm. The rest of the hall is freezing, but right there, where the light seeps through, the floor hums with heat. I'm Darnell. I'm 44. I do maintenance at the hospital, mostly night shifts. I've fixed burst pipes, bloodied tile, elevator wiring that screams when it moves. I've found rats inside the wall panels, heard crying where no speakers are wired, even seen things in the CCTV feed that vanished when I replayed it. But I never believed in any of it. I believed in circuits and voltage and timing, until I started noticing the light under room 5. The east wing hasn't been fully used in nearly a decade. They say a patient started a fire. That's the official report. But I've heard nurses say it was electrical. I've heard others say the patient didn't exist, that there was no chart, no name, that the bed was empty when the smoke alarms went off. Doesn't matter. Room 5 was sealed off, door bolted, wires cut, everything disconnected. But the light started showing up a few months ago. I saw it during a routine pass. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eye, a hallway emergency light bouncing off the floor. But when I walked closer, I could feel it. Heat. Not just the glow, real warmth, like someone had a heater on inside. I crouched down, put my hand to the tile, and flinched. It wasn't hot enough to burn, but it was wrong. I submitted a report. Maintenance logs, request for investigation. Got a call the next day telling me to drop it. The room was sealed, inaccessible, no wiring to check, but the light didn't go away. A few nights later, I passed by again. I'd had a long shift, hadn't slept well in days. Something drew me to that door. I stood outside it for a while, watching the light under the door flicker faintly. It didn't pulse like a regular bulb. It was more organic, like breathing. I pressed my ear to the door. There was a sound inside, soft, rhythmic, not like a machine or vent system. No whirring, no clicking, just a slow, steady inhaling sound, something sleeping or pretending to sleep. I backed away fast. After that, it got worse. I started dreaming of the hallway, over and over. Same dream. I'd be standing outside room 5, and the door would be cracked open just a little. A soft, hot wind would spill through the crack, and I'd see shadows moving inside, just beyond reach. I'd wake up sweating, the skin on my hands burning, as if I'd touched something too hot. And then the light followed me. I'd come home and see it beneath my bathroom door, just a thin slice of yellow against the darkness. I'd flip the lights on, and it would vanish. I changed bulbs, switched outlets. Nothing helped. Once I saw it behind the curtains in my living room, just for a second, like it was seeping in through the cracks. One night, I tried to prove I was wrong. I brought a thermal scanner from the lab and walked to room 5. Nothing around it registered. Everything was cool, dead. But when I aimed the scanner at the door, it flared orange, almost red, like something behind it was alive. I kneeled down again, pressed my hand flat to the floor, and that's when I saw it. A hand. No, not a real hand. A reflection of one. In the glow beneath the door, pale and long-fingered, it reached toward mine. Slow, gentle. I yanked back, heart pounding. I stood up and left the hallway, didn't look back. But that hand, it wasn't mine, and it knew I was there. A few days later, a new nurse came to me in a panic. She'd been making rounds, got turned around, ended up near room 5. She said she saw the light and thought someone had left a device running. She swore she heard whispering from the other side. When she leaned in, something thumped against the door. They transferred her 2 weeks later. Since then, I've stopped telling anyone. I don't pass that hallway anymore. I go around, even if it takes longer. But the light still shows up, not just at work, at home, in parking garages, reflected in puddles. It waits. It hums. I tried talking to the chaplain, told him I was having strange thoughts, that I couldn't sleep. He told me to pray. I'm not religious, but I tried. It didn't help. The next night, I woke up with my bedroom glowing. Not bright, but warm. That same slow-breathing heat. I didn't move. I stayed perfectly still, and I swear, I felt something sit on the edge of my bed. I leave towels under the door now. I tape the cracks in the windows. I don't know if it helps, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something, because I think the light is looking for something. Maybe not me specifically, but someone who notices it, someone who listens when it breathes, someone who sees the hand and doesn't flinch. Sometimes, I wonder what would happen if I opened the door, not just in the dream, but really walked to room 5 and turned the handle. Maybe it would be empty. Maybe it would be on fire. Maybe it would be a space that doesn't belong in this hospital or in this world, but I'm not going to open it because I think it's already open. Not all the way. Not yet. Just cracked. Just enough for the light to seep out. Just enough to be patient. And if I give it what it wants, well then it won't need to stay under the door anymore. Some doors don't open. They watch. There's always an IV pole in 714, even when the room is empty. No bag, no tubing, no patient, just the pole, standing there like it's waiting. Sometimes it's in the corner, sometimes near the bed. And once I saw it by the window with the hook swaying like someone had just walked past it. But no one ever sees it being moved. It's just there, always, and it shouldn't be. My name is Eliza. I'm 29 years old, and I'm in my first year as a nurse in the ICU. Room 714 was the first room I lost a patient in. I remember every second of that night. The patient was a man named Gilbert, 74 years old, admitted after a mild stroke. He was alert, aware, even making jokes. I liked him. He reminded me of my grandfather. I was assigned to his care the night it happened. Vitals were steady, labs unremarkable. Everything was normal until the morning when I found him lying perfectly still, no pulse, monitors flatlined. He looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, like he'd known. There were no alarms. The machine hadn't beeped. His IV bag was empty, completely drained, but there wasn't a drop of fluid in the tubing. The clamp was still shut. No leak, no explanation, just a dry bag and a lifeless man. I documented it, of course. Everyone said it was just one of those things. Stroke patients can turn quickly, but I never believed that. Not really. After that, I started noticing the pole. I didn't want to. I tried to look away, to ignore it, to treat it like every other room and every other shift. But it was there, always standing upright, gleaming a little under the overhead lights. We clear unused rooms after discharge, but no one ever removed the pole from 714. I even asked supplies if it was needed, if maybe there was a reason it stayed. They said they hadn't logged equipment in that room for over 3 weeks. According to them, the pole shouldn't be there at all. One night, I was finishing charting outside the room, and I heard the squeak of wheels just once, a short sound. I looked in, and the pole had moved. I know it had. It was closer to the bed. I stood frozen in the doorway, heart racing, but everything was still. The air felt thick, humid, almost. I stepped back and left the lights on. That was the first night I had trouble sleeping after work. I tried to convince myself it was stress, first-year nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with that room. Patients who were moved there became unsettled. They complained of cold spots, of feeling watched. One young woman who'd been extubated and was nearly ready for discharge began crying in the middle of the night. She kept asking who the other man in the room was. We checked. No one had entered or exited for hours. Cameras showed nothing. Then it started happening during my shifts. Alarms that would reset on their own. Fluids that dripped too quickly or too slowly, even when the lines were perfect. I changed the IV pole once, rolled in a fresh one, and swapped it out. I watched one of the aides take the old one away, but when I came back 2 hours later, the same pole was there. The old one, I knew because I'd marked it with a piece of red tape. The red tape was back. That night, I stayed late. I kept the room unassigned, no patient inside. I dimmed the lights and left the door open, a crack, while I sat at the station, pretending to chart. Around 3 a.m., I heard the faint clink of metal. I looked in, and the IV pole had shifted again, just slightly, angled toward the door like it was leaning in to look. I walked away. I didn't clock out. I just left, drove home in silence. I didn't talk to anyone about it for days, but the feeling didn't go away. It followed me into the break room, into my dreams, even into other rooms. I started imagining the shape of that pole in shadows and reflections, in places it shouldn't be. Once I thought I saw it in the corner of my own bedroom. It was gone when I turned on the light, but my cat was staring at the same spot for nearly 10 minutes after. Weeks passed. The room stayed in rotation. More patients came through, more quiet discharges, more unexplained anxiety. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that it was just a piece of metal, but deep down, I knew the truth. That IV pole wasn't equipment. Not anymore. It was something else, a placeholder, a memory, a presence. I couldn't explain how, but I began to believe that it remembered every patient who died in that room, that it was connected to them, or perhaps that it was waiting for more. And then I forgot to say thank you. That's when things really changed. It had become a strange ritual of mine, whispered under my breath whenever I passed by 714. Thank you for watching, I'd say, or I see you. I don't know why I did it. It felt ridiculous, but it also felt necessary. And then, one night, after a 12-hour shift and back-to-back codes, I was too exhausted. I walked right past 714 without a word. The next morning, every single IV line on my unit had some issue. Pumps failed, fluids leaked. One patient had blood backflow so severely, we had to replace the entire line. I knew it wasn't coincidence. I knew I had ignored something I wasn't supposed to. Since then, I always nod when I pass 714. I always say something, anything. Morning, not today, still here, because I think whatever's connected to that pole wants acknowledgement. Not fear, not worship, just to be seen, to be remembered. The way you'd remember a quiet patient who never got many visitors, who never rang the call bell, but was always grateful when you stopped by. I've seen other nurses start doing it too. Subtle things, small bows of the head, quick glances at the pole, long exhales when they enter the room. We don't talk about it, we pretend it's just another bed. But none of us ever stay too long. None of us ever move the pole again. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if someone did, really moved it, took it out of the building, threw it away. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Maybe that's the only thing keeping 714 from being just another room in a hospital full of ghosts. I still walk these halls, still care for patients, but room 714 will always be the first place I learned the difference between something being haunted and something being inhabited. Grief has rituals, even for those we don't remember losing. No one remembers building that hallway. You ask the older nurses, they shake their heads and mutter about how it must have always been there, but I know that's not true. I used to work nights on the patient flow team, the one that decides where overflow cases go when all the proper ICU beds are filled. I walked those corridors for years. That hallway didn't exist until the winter of 2021. My name is Anna. I'm 52. I've spent most of my adult life in hospitals, managing beds, balancing patient loads, making sure no one got lost in the chaos. I wasn't clinical, but I was always close enough to hear the monitors, to smell the bleach and blood, to feel the tension clinging to the air. I didn't mind. It made me feel useful, necessary, like part of the system, until that hallway appeared. It started after the third COVID surge. We were maxed out every night. ICU beds full, ER bays doubled up, even surgical waiting rooms had stretchers. I was the one they turned to. Where do we put them, they'd ask, and for a few nights, I didn't have an answer. Then one of the newer nurses said something strange. Can we just use the lower wing? There are beds down there. I looked at her like she'd lost her mind. There is no lower wing, I said. That part of the hospital was never finished. She blinked. But I've seen it. Last night I helped transfer a patient there. Room 9B. I didn't argue, not then. But later that night, I walked that way, past the old laundry corridor, where the air turns colder and the walls feel closer. And there it was, a hallway I'd never seen. Narrow, dimly lit, doors lining the right-hand side, each marked with a number. I counted 9A, 9B, 9C, and sure enough, one of them had a soft green light blinking outside, like it was in use. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked back to my desk and pulled up the hospital floor plans. Nothing, no record of that hallway, not on any blueprint, not on the renovation documents. It didn't exist. And yet, it did. For the next 2 months, we used that hallway almost nightly. Patients were sent there when we had nowhere else to put them. Mostly the ones who were stable but not improving, people whose families weren't around to complain. The forgotten ones, the waiting ones. That was the word I started to associate with that wing. Waiting, because none of the patients sent there ever got better. I noticed that too late. The nurses who covered the lower hall didn't talk much. They came back pale, drawn. One told me it was too quiet, that the rooms felt insulated, like sound couldn't escape. Another said the call buttons never worked, so she'd just check on people by instinct. I logged it, sent work orders. Nothing ever got fixed. One night I was called to do a bed audit, administrative oversight. I walked down there with my clipboard, trying to pretend it was like any other part of the hospital. The hallway buzzed faintly, like a refrigerator running. The lights were dim, more yellow than white. I stopped outside room 9B. There was a patient inside, elderly, thin, tubes in his nose, hands folded over a white sheet. But it wasn't him that made me pause. It was the woman sitting beside him. She looked exactly like me. Same hair, same profile, even wore the same black cardigan I kept at my desk. She was holding his hand, looking down at him with eyes full of something I couldn't name. I stood there, frozen. Then she blinked, turned her head just slightly toward me, and in that instant, she vanished. I don't remember getting back upstairs. I don't remember sitting down, but when I looked at my clipboard, room 9B's chart had a visitor logged, Anna M. Santos. My name, my full name, and the patient's last name. It was my mother's maiden name. I hadn't spoken to my mother in over a decade. She died 5 years ago. After that, things got stranger. I started dreaming about that hallway. The walls were narrower in my dreams, the lights dimmer. Sometimes there were no patients, just beds with shapes under the covers, breathing shapes. I always woke up before I reached the end of the hallway. I tried to bring it up once, at a staff meeting. I couched it in language about workflow concerns and emotional strain on night staff. But as soon as I said the lower hallway, the room fell silent. People shifted in their seats. One of the nurse managers, an old friend of mine, met my eyes and shook her head, just once. After that, I stopped talking about it, but the hallway didn't stop. I'd hear it page sometimes, even after it was supposedly sealed. Room 9B requesting vitals check. Oxygen low in 9C. I'd look at the monitors and the core lights would blink just faintly in the system, blips no one could trace. I logged them. Nothing came of it. Then one night, a patient from another wing was found wandering near the laundry corridor, disoriented, crying, said she'd been taken to a room with no ceiling, said she saw someone wearing her daughter's face. Security dismissed it. Night terrors, delirium, but I knew. I haven't worked since that winter. I told them it was burnout. They were sympathetic, offered leave, counseling. I took it, but I never went back. Still, some nights, I wake to the hum of fluorescent lights. I swear I hear the soft chime of a heart monitor, the faint hiss of oxygen, and always that buzz, that quiet electric hum. It's not loud, it's not scary, it's patient. The hallway is still there. I know it. They say it's condemned now, sealed off again. But even sealed things breathe. Even sealed things remember. And sometimes, late at night, I hear my old pager chime from the drawer I never opened again. And I know what it means. Overflow room 9B is ready. Sometimes you end up exactly where you're supposed to, not because you chose it, but because something remembers your name. It's the only door in the ICU without a number, tucked between 712 and 714, right where the fire escape stairwell should be, according to the blueprints. No placard, no patient assignment, no entry in the electronic bed tracker, just a plain gray door. It's always closed, always locked. But sometimes I hear someone breathing on the other side. My name is Miles. I'm 41. I work nights as a respiratory therapist. I move through the ICU like a shadow, setting vents, adjusting settings, drawing ABGs, barely noticed by the rest of the staff. That's how I like it. I keep quiet. I listen more than I talk. Hospitals are full of noise, but the important things are always in the silence. I first noticed the door during a late shift change 2 years ago. I was replacing a circuit on a BiPAP machine outside 714, and I looked up to check the oxygen flow. That's when I saw it, this unmarked door where there should have been a wall. It wasn't there the night before. I know it wasn't. I'd walked that hallway every shift for 4 years, but now it was just there, like it had been waiting. I asked around. The charge nurse said it had always been there. Facilities said it led to a utility closet, but when I asked to get inside, just to verify for my own peace of mind, they said the key was missing. No one could find it. They acted like it didn't matter, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, because I started hearing things. At first, just faint breathing, like someone sleeping behind the door. Then whispers, not voices, just the shape of voices, the rhythm of someone trying to speak through glass. I once thought I heard my name, just a breath of it, Miles. I started walking past the door slower. I'd glance down at the base. No light came through, but the floor in front of it was always colder than the rest of the hallway, always just enough to notice. One night, during a code in 716, I was drawing blood when the hallway lights flickered. Not the whole unit, just that short stretch by the unmarked door. And when the lights returned, the door was slightly open, just an inch, enough to see darkness beyond. Not shadow darkness, like it swallowed light. I froze. Another therapist, Kayla, ran past me to help with the code. She didn't see the door, didn't even glance at it. But I watched her pass it, and for a brief moment, her reflection appeared on the metal handle, twisted, not reversed like a mirror, but warped like the image didn't belong to her at all. I closed the door, Slowly, it made no sound, and when I pressed my palm to the surface, it was warm, like someone had just been leaning against the other side. After that, the door started showing up in my dreams. I'd be walking the ICU alone, and every room would be empty, the beds stripped, the monitors silent. Only the unmarked door would remain, glowing faintly at the edges. I'd approach it, always knowing I shouldn't, and just before I opened it, I'd wake up, my chest tight, hands damp, the smell of antiseptic clinging to my sheets. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to be pulled from my rotation, but I started documenting the door, notes in my phone, photos, though every photo came out wrong, blurry, washed out, or simply black where the door should have been. One time, I caught a reflection in the window across the hall, a figure standing in front of the door, tall, thin, motionless. When I turned around, the hallway was empty. Then came the patient, in 7:15. Her name was Evelyn, late 40s, post-op complications, on a vent. I was checking her settings during night rounds when she suddenly grabbed my wrist. Hard, her eyes were wide open. She mouthed something, even with the tube in her throat. I leaned closer. She mouthed it again. "Don't open it." I asked her what she meant. She pointed weakly toward the door. Then her monitor spiked. She went into VFib right in front of me. We got her back, but she never fully regained consciousness. I stayed by her bed for almost 2 hours, watching her sleep, the vent hissing softly, the monitor steady. When I left the room, I glanced at the door again. It was open another inch. That was the last time I went near it during a shift. Now I avoid it. I make excuses to take the longer route around, but I still feel it, like pressure in the air, like gravity pulling sideways. And every once in a while, I hear the latch click as I walk away. They started renovations last month, remodeling the ICU to increase isolation capacity. I watched the contractors walk the halls, taking measurements. I waited for them to reach the door, but they never did. It was like it didn't exist to them. Their blueprints showed a blank wall. I confronted the site manager, showed him the door. He looked confused, then he smiled like I'd made a joke. "There's no door there, sir," he said. "But you're standing in front of it," I replied. He frowned, turned around, then looked back at me and said, "I think you need to take a break." The next day, drywall was placed over the spot, seamless, painted over, just a wall now, nothing behind it. But I know it's still there, because the air still turns cold when I pass, because I still hear someone breathing behind it, because 2 nights ago, the drywall was cracked, just a hairline fracture, as if something behind it had pressed forward. I've started sleeping with the hallway camera feeds open on my tablet. I leave the volume on low. Sometimes, around 3 a.m., I hear static that only lasts a second. Then the feed glitches, and the area outside the door flickers darker than the rest. Just for a moment, just enough. I know I'm not the only one who sees it, but none of us talk. We're ICU. We've learned that some things can't be charted. Some things don't get reported. They just stay with you, like a bad dream that wears hospital whites. I keep telling myself it's just a door, that if no one opens it, it won't open on its own. But deep down, I know that's a lie, because some nights I wake up gasping, and I swear for a second I smell disinfectant and feel my fingers resting on a warm metal handle, and I think I finally opened it, even if only in my sleep.